It's not ready. Welcome to the Golden Pathway Zoom seminar. In the Golden Pathway Zoom seminars, we try to help people transition from the 7 major world religions into the teachings of the Ascended Masters. We've been doing these workshops for about 9 years, and the latest ones have been on relationships, abundance. This year, our theme is climbing the mystical path. We worked on psychology. And today we're very happy to have with us Reverend Peter Duffy, who's ordained minister at the Church Universal and Triumphant. And he has been in the teachings of the Ascended Masters since 1979. He's a teaching assistant at what we call Summit University since 1996. And he does seminars all over Europe, North and South America, Australia, Africa, as well as in the US. He's been our spiritual director at the Church Universal and Triumphant for the last 6 years, and he loves to explore how the teachings of the Masters give insight into political and social issues of our time. So he keeps us all informed. He's a trained mediator and past president of the Community Mediation Center in Bozeman, Montana, and he lives in Montana with his wife, Uliana, and his young daughter, Electra, whom we all love. Now, our topic today is a path of personal Christhood. So we all know that personal Christhood is our goal in life, right? But how do we get there? How do we know if we're really making progress? So Peter's going to share some insights from a lecture that Elizabeth Clare Prophet did from August 1986, including some case studies from her files. So be prepared this workshop to personalize your path to personal Christhood. Welcome, Peter. We're glad to have you with us.
Hi, Patricia. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to see you all. Some familiar faces, people I know well, and also some new faces. So I'm very happy to be here and talk about this topic. This was inspired by a sermon I read recently by Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And as Patricia said, it was 1986. And it was a very key time in the organization. It was definitely a change in cycles. We were moving from Camelot, which was our headquarters in Los Angeles, where we'd been since 1978. And we'd just sold that property, and we were in the process of moving to the inner retreat in Montana. And so she explained that it was a step up that was needed for everybody in consciousness to come to the inner retreat. It's a higher altitude, higher elevation, but also a great dispensation in the property and the land and everything the masters wanted to see come forth there. So we all had to move up higher, and it was really a matter of internalizing or externalizing more of our Christhood. And what were the things that were standing in the way of that? And so I just wanted to share a few highlights of that lecture. We're actually going to be publishing it in an ebook before the end of the year because it's such important teaching. We really want everyone to have access to it and have it's really something you could study and read over and over again. And there are so many keys to the spiritual path in there. But I'd just like to cover a few things today, which were really key for me. And one was the concept that, sometimes we can think we're making progress on the path, but we're not actually. We just kind of, she talked about the concept of being on a rung of the ladder, and you can be, and this rung can be a line which goes forever in each direction. You can take yourself and you can move to a different situation. People get divorced or they move to a different town or change of circumstances. But if you're not really kind of tackling the dweller and striving to come up higher, you can go through this whole journey and not really get to anywhere different in your spiritual path, even though circumstances may be changing. She said, you can look at, sometimes you go back to your hometown and you meet people that you knew when you were younger, and and they haven't changed in 30 years or 40 years. And they may be quite happy where they are, or uh, have the challenges of life, but they're really not making progress on the path. And we can do that too on the spiritual path if we're not really striving to come up higher. And she talked about the concept of, how do you tell when you're stuck, or what is the sign that you're stuck? And she said, I'll just read a little bit of this. It's just really wonderful teaching. She said, along comes Maitreya, a spiritual teacher or even a friend who may deliver the real power of the law. Now, people get upset. The aura is turned inside out. They get angry, and and so that's kind of the sign that something has been poked in you and your dweller. Something's exposed. So what do you do with that? If you just kind of ignore it or let it go or kind of excuse it and don't tackle it, then it can kind of, it's like this bit of the dweller has come up, and because it's there, you can see it, you can make the calls on it, you can consciously let it go. But if you don't, it'll just kind of go under the surface, and you can go back to just leading a normal life, and it's kind of like it's still there in the subconscious because you didn't go after it. So that's something that would happen, with the messenger. You'd be at the inner retreat, and something would come up for you, or you'd run into her, and she'd point out something, and it was an opportunity to see that aspect of the dweller on the threshold, your not self, the anti-self, the kind of subconscious, unconscious, negative aspect of our being that we fed for many lifetimes. And if you kind of accept the message that God's sending you through whoever it is, might be through the messenger, it might be through someone else. If you can accept it and say, okay, I see it. I see this aspect of myself that I don't like. I'm going to work on it. I'm going to consciously try to let it go. I'm going to consciously make the calls to God, to the angels, to the masters to cut me free from that. Then you can be free from it, and you can take a step up in consciousness. And as you let go of these aspects of the dweller, of your not self, then you make space for your own Christ self to descend, and you can embody more of your Christ consciousness. So it's an interesting concept. And there's the thing that El Moria talks about, if the messenger being an ant, heed him. This is something that we've heard so many times. And it actually is a teaching that he gave back in the Agni Yoga books. You see it there. And the message is that God can send various people to you to point out something that you need to work on, something you need to change. And, we shouldn't wait for El Moria to appear, or when Mother was here, the messenger was here, for her to appear, and tell you. God doesn't need to send a representative in that way, but God can send anyone that you might meet in the checkout of the supermarket, or, your boss at work, or whoever it might be, who could point out something in you that needs to change. And what do you do with that? What's your reaction to their pointing that out? If you get defensive and say, no, it's not right. Well, this is being blown all out of proportion. If you kind of excuse it, if you justify it, then it's kind of like you're holding on to that and not being willing to let it go. So it's always a challenge. And when the messenger is an ant, rather than, someone who looks like the messenger of God, when the messenger is an ant, someone who's maybe annoying or insignificant, but just comes along and pushes your buttons, it's easy to kind of react in a negative way, the human consciousness does, rather than accept what that person or what God is trying to give you through that person. and you observe your reaction. What's your emotional reaction? Do you have an emotional reaction to it, which is kind of beyond what's rational when you look back on it? Why did I react so much to that particular situation or what that person said? So when you see those things, you have to really work on them. That's the message. And I'd like to give maybe a couple of case studies, which I thought were very interesting, that she gave. So one was a letter that Amoria wrote to someone who had been serving on the staff at the inner retreat. A very interesting letter analyzing this person's state of consciousness. So I'd like to just read some excerpts from that and then maybe talk about it a little bit. July 1st, 1986, dear so-and-so, on this day and date, this is a letter from Elmoria. It is my duty to inform you that it is the assessment of Lord Maitreya and Dr. Gillen Council that your progress on the spiritual path is being neither facilitated nor advanced by the circumstances of your service at the Royal Teton Range. Moreover, due to your own outlook and perceptions of these circumstances, based on your karma and prior associations with the Brotherhood on the initiatic path, it is deemed that the elements of your own consciousness neither lend themselves to nor facilitate the progress that should be made through the Guru-Chela relationship. That is the foundation of our community here. Through your ignorance of key tenets of the law, which you have been taught throughout the tenure of your service, your spiritual progress has come to a standstill. It is therefore the conclusion, after certain deliberations of the Karmic Board, that the best possible means for your re-establishing within yourself the real spirit of the path and Chelaship will take place to the best advantage of your soul outside of the community experience, rather than according to the rules of the community here. Moria goes on to give some more analysis of this person and what the situation was. And Mother also goes on to talk about it. The problem of the individual was a chip on the shoulder and the concept that he had a lot of professional skill and he should be in the position of leadership rather than the people who were the leadership in that department. And so he was always kind of looking at what they were doing, criticizing and thinking he could do a better job and so on. But what was worse than that was that he was spreading this kind of gossip and condemnation to new staff members who are coming to join and work in this department. So it was creating a real division in the community. And I don't think he'd been directly approached by the messenger before this, but much teaching given about the importance of avoiding criticism and so on, working in harmony with others and respecting those who you're working for, the office that they hold. And in spite of all this teaching, even in the community and from the presence of the masters on the platform and the dictations each week and during the conferences, he wasn't making the changes he needed to make in his own consciousness. And so at a certain point, and we've all really done this at one time or another, the masters have said, you have to, there's nothing more we can do for you here. You have to go out and let the world be your teacher. That's what happened to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. It's happened to all of us in one lifetime or another, or else we would have made our ascension back on Atlantis or wherever. The masters have said, there's nothing more to be said. The world shall be your teacher now. And so we go out and make our way in the world, dealing with our karma and with running into various ant messengers instead of the presence of Lord Maitreya. And we have to make our way back where we're willing to finally say, okay, I'm willing to make the commitment. Please receive me back in the mystery school. And this time I will do my best. I make the commitment to walk the path and no longer ignore what the teachers, what the guru has to say to me. And it's very interesting. The messenger goes on to analyze what the effect was of this person on the community. And there was one assignment he was given one time, moving some trailers, and he to do this assignment. He decided that it was really beneath him. He had a lot more skill, a lot more important things that he could do than moving these trailers. And so the job was given to the person under him, and then someone else was brought in to help with the project who wasn't originally supposed to be on the project at all. And that person was Scott Carter. And some of you may remember that there was a very serious accident where they were moving these trailers, and one of them slipped, and Scott's head was actually caught between two trailers, and he was airlifted to Billings and in critical condition. And fortunately, by the grace of God, the doctors and many prayers from Mother and members of the community, he recovered fully. But Mother was saying that when one person is out of alignment like that, it can be the open door in the community for the force of darkness to enter in. And so we all have to look at individually, do we let our dweller get the best of us at times? She began this sermon by playing a video of a news report about crack cocaine, which was a new form of cocaine at that point, which was really becoming an epidemic in New York and other cities, and much more addictive than regular cocaine. And there are many people being, dying of overdoses and so on. And Mother was saying that, there were light bearers who were being taken out by this, who were getting caught up in it and who were dying. There were videos of some people who had survived it and managed to turn their lives around. And Mother was saying, these are people who have light. You can see it, but they got caught up in something very dark. And there's this planetary dweller on the threshold or force of evil behind cocaine and other drugs. And she said that if you're looking at how do you go after that? How do you rescue people who are caught up in this force of evil? You have to realize that your own dweller on the threshold is the same as the dweller on the threshold of planetary evil that is trying to take out the light bearers. So we have to have the sense of co-measurement, that what we do internally has everything to do with what we can do in the world or what difference we can make in the world. And if we are trying to rescue people from who are caught up in drugs, we aren't going after our own dweller on the threshold, and we are kind of feeding the beast on a planetary level, and our work won't be effective. So if not for the saving of our own souls, but even just for the saving of the light bearers in the world and the saving of our children. We know children in this community who are caught up in suicide and drugs and so on. Children are keepers of the flame. So there is every reason for us to take this very seriously, and to take very seriously the tackling of our own dweller on the threshold. So one case study that was very interesting. There was another case study. Just summary of this. Here is a case in point. A co-worker at the ranch, a man, informs me that he has been in love with a married woman, a chiller at the ranch, for nigh 3 years. This has been a desperate situation. He has removed himself from the situation because the woman has children, but to no avail. The woman is also in love with him. So they secretly begin to see one another. And when the situation has gone too far, they then receive the letter. And the letter is talking about this attraction they have and this relationship, and they feel like they're meant to be together. They've been praying about it for 3 years. They've done novenas to the Great Divine Director, novenas to Mother Mary, and the conclusion they come to is that she needs to get divorced and leave her husband and children, and they need to get married. But they never asked the messenger because they didn't want to. They were afraid of what she might say. That she might say they couldn't get married, or might say they have to leave the inner retreat, or whatever. So the messenger says, the situation, as I see it clearly, is a matter of fantasy and karma, and the attack of the sinister force out of the bowels of death and hell to destroy a marriage and to divide father and mother from children. But it is too late to give this instruction. It has gone much too far in that they are hopelessly entangled in the mire that has been sent to them a strong delusion, as the Bible says. So all I can do is to give them the option of the decision. She must either return to her husband or leave with this man. I gave them the choice and they decided to leave. She to get divorced and they to get married. This is what they are doing. So they had to leave the organization for a year. And she said, I do not know what will be the disposition of El Mori at the end of 1 year. What the messenger explained is at this point, they've got so caught up in this spiral, which they've been creating for 3 years, that they can't really even disentangle themselves. And if she told them that they had to drop the whole thing and she had to go back to her husband and he had to forget about the whole thing, it wouldn't really help because they'd both be unhappy because it wasn't what they wanted to do. And she said, in one sense, they've been making everybody around them miserable for 3 years because of this suffering that they're going through. And so, what they'll do is do quickly. But the problem fundamentally is that they weren't willing to talk to the guru about it, which means that they weren't really wanting God's will in this situation. They weren't willing to really put it to God and be happy with the answer. So, we may think, well, what's the application of this when we don't have the physical guru with us? How do we deal with these situations? They did have the physical guru, but they avoided that confrontation in a sense. They avoided talking to her about it because they were afraid of what God wanted wasn't what they wanted. And so they did all their decrees to the Great Divine Director and the will of God, but they really weren't wanting to hear the answer, so they didn't hear the answer. So I think any of us could apply that situation in our lives. We have questions that come up. What should I do? Should I take this job? Should I get married? Should I move to a different city? Or whatever it might be. And we may do our novenas to the will of God. We may do our decrees to the Great Divine Director for divine direction and so on. But is there a point in us which is wanting this more than what we want the will of God, where we're not willing to surrender and not really open to whatever God answer God may give us as a result of our decrees? And so I think it can come down to the ant messenger again. You can ask God to give you a clear direction, and who's it going to come through? Is it if the direction or the answer somehow comes through the ant messenger, it's easy to ignore the ant. This little ant comes along and tells you something, and it's just an ad, it wasn't really God telling me that, or or the voice, the still small voice of God can come and give you the whisper in the ear that this isn't the right thing. But if it's just that kind of internal voice, you can say, oh, well, it must have been a stray thought, or wasn't really God telling me that, or it was just an ad that wasn't really a message from God. And so you can carry on and still be attached to what you want, even though you're giving the decrees. And so it really needs a lot of honesty, a lot of being willing to look at your own thought processes. If a thought comes up, really look at it. Is this something God's trying to tell me? And you can also, I think, go to someone for counseling about it. The counselor isn't going to tell you what to do, but the counselor can help you reflect on what your own internal processes are, what within you and your psychological patterns is attracting you to this situation, or impelling you in a certain direction, which may not be for the highest good. It may just be a different place on the rung, on the same rung of the ladder, rather than really taking a step up. One thing Mother said in this lecture is free will is supreme on the path. We're all about the violet flame, the flame of freedom. So the violet flame is not going to overturn your free will. And so you have to really be willing to say, not my will, but thine be done. And it has to come from a deep place inside you, not just the words, but really a place of surrender, where we're willing to give everything to God and surrender even the things that we might want most on the altar, and say, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. So I think, let's see. There's a point on the path that we all kind of get to, in a sense, which is the moment in the Garden of Gethsemane. Are we going to go through that ultimate initiation on the path of the crucifixion, which is part of the initiation of the resurrection? You can't have a resurrection unless you have a crucifixion. And there is that point where, not my will, but thine be done is the necessary surrender. And Mother was talking about her experience of this when we were facing a court case. The organization was facing a court case in 1986. It was a very serious lawsuit. Someone was suing us for hundreds of millions of dollars. They were a disaffected former member, and they had joined forces with the anti-cult movement, and they were trying to put the church out of business. And the trial was a real miscarriage of justice, bringing up all sorts of prejudicial testimony and trying to make our organization look like we were a dangerous cult and so on, really prejudicing the jury. So we were all, doing our call for the will of God and for divine justice to prevail in the whole situation. And Mother was saying that this situation brought her to the point of a new level of surrender, where she had to be willing to give everything for the saving of community, all of her Christhood, everything that she had 24 hours a day. And she said the purpose of this lecture was to help all of us, come to the point of that surrender where we really do let go of everything and give give our lives to God 100%. She said that is the goal of our path. That's where the path eventually will lead us at some point. And what she was calling us to in the lecture was not to postpone that to a future time, but to realize we'll be there someday. Why not make that surrender of what we have now and make that now and then see what will happen? She said what you could expect is, as it talks about in the Bible, the coming of the Lord into your temple suddenly. So it's really the surrender of the self, the lesser self, that our Christ self might descend into this temple. So with those comments, I'd like to open up to if there's anyone has any questions or comments they would like to make about what I've said so far.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll try to phrase this because it's like it's a process. So I mentioned the commitment that I had made before we started recording,
Mhm.
and God is holding me to my word. I can tell, and
Yeah.
I feel this inner resistance. I don't want it, but I feel this inner resistance to becoming the Christ as much as I want the Christ. I want to be the Christ because I want to serve at that level. I want to save as many light bearers as I can. I mean, just to put it in a real simple way. But I'm resisting. And I had this dream last week where I was actually, I think I must have been battling my dweller because I was wrestling with somebody in my dream, and I actually woke up growling, which sounds awful. But I think I was actually battling my dweller. So it's the battle is getting very intense. And so I'm just wondering if you have any like just insight, on how to get through this cycle more quickly.
Yeah. Well, the battle does get intense, and there's a few different ways of looking at it. One is there's a certain element of fear of change in the human consciousness. If I let go of these, these elements of the dweller, which have been my defense mechanisms, which have got you through life this far. When you're a child, you get attacked, and you're, what's your defense mechanism? How do you keep yourself safe? I know I've met people who their defense mechanism is to get angry. If you point out something, they'll get angry and react in an angry way, or they'll get angry if they don't get what they want, and they find that anger serves them well in a sense, and that it helps them advance in their career and achieve a lot of things. And what would life be like if they let go of this? And how would they defend themselves? And how would they even achieve what they need to do in their work, for example, in their career? They don't have any other strategies. That's the strategy they know. And if they let go of that, they're going to be way less effective. Your job, and that's kind of what you got to do. You kind of you got to let that go and then learn something new. So there's a part of it which is like you've got to reprogram your consciousness. You got to learn new ways and let go of the old things, and that's a very in that transition, it can be very uncomfortable, especially as you get older. Teenagers can change on a dime, and this week they're doing something really different. So you got to kind of get into that. Part of it, I think, is you get into that kind of that adventurous mode.
That's it.
Yeah, it's an adventure.
Yeah. And I actually think that's exactly what I need to hear, because I think sometimes actually making a big change in the physical, changing your environment or changing about the line of work you're doing, can help with that.
Yeah.
For me personally, maybe
Yeah.
not. I know that helps me.
Yeah. Yeah. So just kind of, I had a few more thoughts about what you said. I mean, I think that's that's the insight that you needed. That's great, but other people may be interested in some other things too. And that is, there is the dweller that you're tackling when you want to come up higher. And so it's the internal dweller, but it's also the external planetary dweller, which doesn't want you to come up higher.
Okay.
And Mother was saying in the days before this lecture, she said it was very interesting to observe the different dwellers of people on staff that were kind of reacting ahead of it. She was seeing all these kind of examples coming up, which were, in a sense, case studies that she could talk about in the lecture. So it was kind of instructional for her, but also everyone's dweller kind of doesn't want to come up higher, and it's kind of reinforced by the planetary dweller. So you got to keep up your spiritual protection so that you keep out the external forces, and then you also keep that those internal negatives bound, so that they're not they're kind of the thought form is the dwellers in this blue box that Archangel Michael puts around it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of constrained and can't get out, and then gradually, little by little, you kind of deal with it and deal with bits of it, and it's gradually reduced. But you got to keep it in a blue box until then. is the thought form.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. Okay, so one of the points you made is that as you're battling this dweller, you're not only battling your own dweller, but you're also battling the planetary dweller.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The external forces will tend to reinforce the negative within you.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
But I think you're kind of on the right track if you're aware of the struggle.
Oh yeah.
Then that's the key. Because I think many people are not aware of it, and so they get caught off guard, or they don't pass the test because they don't realize that it is a test.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, Carol and Peter. Linda.
Yes, Peter, can you tell us more about the blue box? I heard something about that for the first time in the essentials this last class, but I've never heard about it before. It's something that has to do with Archangel Michael.
Oh, yeah, it's a thought form. You called Archangel Michael to seal your dweller in the blue box. And it's kind of like just this visualization. You see it, this blue box, and Archangel Michael, puts it in and seals the lid. And it's not so much it's not like a dispensation or something, but it's just like a visualization you can give that kind of makes the concept a little bit more concrete.
Is it like the aluminum foil that we put satanic things in and it keeps it there and doesn't affect us?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't really thought about that much, It's just kind of I kind of visualize this box, it's this blue box with a lid on it, and then Archangel Michael shoves it in there and puts on it. I don't know, maybe he sits on the box. I don't know. Whatever works for you.
Thank you.
I have a question too, Peter. And
Yeah.
for me, what comes up is I'm battling this dweller. What comes up, it takes me right back almost every time to the 2 o'clock line of fear and doubt, and not doubt that I can do it, but fear that if I do it, will I have any friends left? Will people within a retreat think you're this person who thinks she's better than everybody else? If you actually start to outpicture the Christ, I've heard people say that Jesus wouldn't even get through our some of our processes we have at our church right now. So all that comes up for me, and I'm like, Carol, I set a date, and the
Yep.
date is now.
Yep.
So, I mean, the
Yeah.
blue box
But
might be helpful. Dribble stuff all down here is sometimes helpful and sometimes not. I
yeah,
feel
well,
stuck.
well, the fear that you mentioned isn't necessarily unrealistic. You know, if you look at what happened to the saints in the Catholic Church, they were often persecuted very much by the church. But that's not a reason not to do it. You know, it's part of the past. So after a while, you kind of get used to that, I think, you know. It's just like, okay, this is the path. Okay, this is someone in the community who should be a chiller. And but you know, what I'm getting from them is, well, you don't even know what it is, you know. It could be their dweller attacking you, or it could be uh, that they're an ant messenger and they're pointing out something in you that needs to go. It's, you know, sometimes the saints, you know, I mean, that's the way the saints would see it often. Padre Pio was, for 10 years, he wasn't allowed to hear confessions or say mass in public. And it seemed like a terrible injustice. And you kind of wonder, well, you know, how much 10 years of his service, you know, so as amazing as it was lost. But, you know, perhaps that it was something that attested and needed to pass through of ego and being willing to surrender the whole thing that he thought was his mission and say, you know, not my will, but thine be done. So all of these things, you know, can be even in themselves, you know, a means of your initiation and your coming up higher. So if you're worried about what people think about you, you know, is it the ego wants to be liked by everybody?
Yeah.
It's that's an interesting test.
Or do you just want to be effective at whatever it is you're supposed to be doing, which is also a test. Thank you.
Elizabeth has her hand up.
I was just going to say, Peter, that I read a biography of Mother Teresa, and I think she went for 50 years. She used to hear the word of God, and for 50 years she didn't hear anything, but she kept at her mission anyway. Yeah.
I was thinking about something that you know, I mentioned in answer to Carol's question about the sense of adventure, and it was something I read, which has really helped me in a lot of circumstances, by William F. Buckley Jr. He was talking about when he was a teenager, he had a job on his father's boat. They used to do charter tours, and he was part of the crew, and he talked about all the things that would go wrong on the boat, you know. And go wrong all the time, you know. But he said something that really struck me, and that is when you're young, inconvenience is an adventure. And when you're older, the opposite is true. And adventure becomes an inconvenience. And I thought of that a lot. You know, I've done a lot of traveling, and, you know, things go wrong when you're traveling. The flight's cancelled, or, you know, or you can't get anything decent to eat, or, you know, all sorts of things can go wrong. And how do you treat it? You know, just imagine, well, if I was a teenager, you know, this would be an adventure. And so you can kind of change your consciousness there, and really, it's something that's really helped me in dealing with those situations. So I kind of put yourself back in the teenager mode where, you know, you can adapt.
Right, when adventure was fun, like
Yeah.
those inconveniences were fun.
Yeah, when something goes wrong, it's okay, that's another adventure, you know. Okay, we're going to spend the night in the airport. Well, how do we how do we make that fun?
Right, who are we gonna meet?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I like it, thank you. I have another question. No one else has anything. So, and this is for everyone on the call. Does anyone have like a visualization, or Peter, what do you suggest? You know, if in terms of visualizing the Christ coming into our temple. I'm reading the book in a book study, Walking with the Master.
Mhm.
And I think that I read something recently about like visualizing the outline of the Christ, you know, like coming into your temple, or seeing Jesus coming into your temple. But I'm wondering if you have a suggestion, or if anybody uses anything like that that works for them to make it more real. Because right now for me it's sort of nebulous. It's like, you know, what does that look like? What does my Christ self look like? You know, what would that look like if I was the Christ?
Want to have any thoughts?
Yes, I have one. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can? Okay. I just wanted to thank both of you for bringing up some very interesting thoughts, and it gives you a reason to reevaluate maybe some of the things you've done in the past or whatever. And one of the things that came to my mind was sometimes I don't hear anything, but I get a feeling, strong feeling, like this is something you need to do or you need to look at. And boy, I'll tell you, it's tough because there are times when you think, what? You really want me to do that, or say that or whatever? And I know that if I don't do it, then I get kind of like a disappointment feeling in myself. That's what it feels like. Not fear, but it's a disappointment that I didn't take that chance. I didn't take that opportunity, because these opportunities don't come around all the time. And so I haven't had one lately, I must admit, but I remember times and it was like very strong. No, don't ignore it. It's there for a reason. And what I've found is that sometimes, you put your foot in your mouth, it feels like that. And it's hard. But, God has a way, seems like, something you wouldn't even expect was a benefit from it. But it's like, it's worth the chance to take. It's far worse if you ignore it. That's what I've discovered in life. I don't know if
Yeah.
that helps.
Thank you, Irene. Yeah, definitely.
You're welcome.
Greg, did you want to add something?
I wanted to share a couple of thought forms that I've used lately to picture the Christ coming in. And one of them you've probably seen in art. It's been around for a long time, but it's come to my mind lately, where you have Christ completely holding you up like he's carrying you. Have you seen that thought form? It's so beautiful. It's just like Christ has got his arms around you and he's carrying you through whatever you need.
Mm.
The other thought form is I saw it recently on a movie. It was a Padre Pio movie, and it was from a kind of it's set in Italy. It's very different, but it had a scene in there when Padre Pio received the stigmata. It was when he was younger. And the way they did it theatrically, you know, a lot of the things they did in there weren't with words, but with the actor. But they had Padre Pio sitting there, and when he received the stigmata, with they had the picture of Christ's hand coming in front of his chest on one side, like that, like physically. It was really a strong thought form for me, and I saw it about a month ago, and it's really stuck with me. And then you see Padre Pio's, you just see 2 tears coming out of his eyes, because I'm sure it was very painful. That's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Greg.
So Patricia, I thought I'd say, I was looking for this, where do you put your hand up? And it's disappeared. It used to be like, put your hand up. And now it says, acknowledge people's hands. Any case, it doesn't matter. I don't have my hand up. Going back a little bit earlier about Padre Pio being kind of banned for 10 years. And then there was something else about the saints. And I remember that one of the masters said that one of the reasons why Mother qualified as being a messenger is that in her embodiment as Saint Catherine of Siena, she was in the church. She disagreed with the Pope or whatever it was, like, you know, the head of the church, but she didn't rebel and condemn the Pope, and she didn't like leave the church and say, okay, you know, this is wrong, I'm out of here. So she voiced her opinion. She gave what she believed was true, but she didn't condemn the office. Like the guru, it's an office in hierarchy. So she didn't condemn the office of the hierarchy. And Peter or someone else, you may correct me if I'm not saying the exact right thing, but that was the gist of it, is that you know, we can get a test and we're not sure which way to go, because you know what the church is doing or what my boss is doing or someone else may not be correct. That doesn't mean we condone it or that we agree with it, but we don't condemn the law of hierarchy. And I think that's similar to what Padre Pio did, right? He stayed in the church. He accepted his discipline of 10 years of not being able to do anything. He didn't leave the church. He didn't start his own church. He didn't condemn the Pope or whatever. So I think, different initiations have different solutions and not all the same. And if it was all the same, it would be more like, this is a black and white thing, but the higher we go, it's more gray, and we have to use our discernment, and we have to know which way to go in this situation, because it's not black and white. And so we have to exercise our intuition and our Christ judgment and discernment. But that is one of the things I remember, and Peter can maybe give the final words of exactly what that was, that how Mother, as Catherine of Siena, acted, that proved to the master that she would respect the law of hierarchy and so on.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. It was the time when the popes were very corrupt, and she would write letters to the Pope privately, rebuking him for the corruption, but always supporting the office, and her support for the office was the key, and that's what the saints always did, and it's very interesting to see it. Many examples, you see St. Francis, you see Teresa of Lisieux, and all of these the saints of the Catholic Church. They respected the hierarchy. They respected the office. And it's very important. And I think it's very unfortunate when people kind of lose sight of that. And I've seen people who were, unhappy with things the church was doing, and they thought they could have been done better. And so they would use that as an excuse to leave the church. And it's a very unfortunate decision. Something I've seen over many years and working at the headquarters is that I would come across things every now and then that I thought this didn't seem right. I didn't really understand it. I wasn't sure. I thought maybe this is the way it's meant to be. But what I saw is that Moria would sort everything out in the end. And it might take longer, longer than you would like or longer than you would think. But if you just kind of stick with Moria, he'll sort it all out in the end. So I think it's a very important thing to remember. And I always had the sense that I'm working for Moria. And, there are times when I'd be working in a paid assignment, and sometimes he would have me working on something else. Like there was a time where I was doing a lot of mediation, wasn't working at the church, but it was a very great experience. I learned a lot that's really helped me in my job as spiritual director. So, I could have had a sense of injustice about what happened when I got fired from my job but I saw it, okay, I got fired. Moria has a different assignment for me now. And so just looking for Moria's hand in things and, what's God trying to tell you through the situation. It's not about what the other people do. You may not be correct in your assessment of that, but it doesn't really matter. Well, the key to your spiritual path is, what do you make of it? What's your reaction to this situation? What's Moria calling you to? Stay with that and keep calling to Moria. And if you think something's not right, you can talk to him about it, certainly. And I've seen that he sorts it all out in the end.
I might just say something. Mark Prophet, in a lecture, he said he couldn't visualize the head of the Christ, so he said he just visualized light. And if you visualize light, you can't really go wrong.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts, anyone?
I thought I'd just add on that about the church where people have been dissatisfied with one of the leaders or so on, and they leave the church. And they lose the fact that when you leave the church, you're bailing overboard on Mitres clippership. So it's not the leaders that make the difference of you staying in or not. If people are unsatisfied or they're angry or they don't agree with a particular leader or a particular person in the church, then leaving the church is they justifying that as being the appropriate reaction, but that person is not the church. And so when they actually decide to leave the church and not just keep to themselves and stay in the church, then they're actually leaving El Moria's Summit Lighthouse, and they leaving Lord Mitres clippership. Totally. Yeah. So that's a perspective to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah.
We are the church.
We are the church, yep. And one thing that's come out of this is, Moria's book on the will of God. It's called The Sacred Adventure. And I think that's a way to look at the path of personal Christhood as an adventure. And you don't know what it's going to look like or where it's going to take you. I think sometimes of told the apostles, "Come, leave your nets, I will make you fishers of men." Put yourself in their situation. You know, they've got this fishing business. It's Peter and John, isn't it? Peter is one of them. And they've got this fishing business. It was their dads before them, and and they'll get married and have some kids, and they'll pass the business on to their children, you know, and life would be pretty predictable. They could see what the trajectory of life would be. So here comes Jesus and says, "Follow me." And going, you know, how long are we going to be? You know, where is it going to end up? And you don't know, but you take the step, and life will be an adventure if you follow the Master. And those 12 men changed the world. They ended up traveling all over the world. Thomas went to India, to Russia. James went to Spain. They went all over the world, and they changed the world. It wasn't Jesus changed the world, they changed the world, you know, powered by him. But because they were willing to take that step and follow where he led, life became a very grand adventure, and they did change the world. So that's what the Masters are calling us to, is the sacred adventure, the path of personal Christ. And we don't know, but if we step out and with the sense that it will be wonderful, life won't be boring, life will be a great adventure, and we'll see where God leads us. So thank you all. Thank you for all your comments. There's certainly a lot to think about in this lecture, and seeing when the ebook comes out, it's really a wonderful teaching.
Thank you, Peter. It's great. I think it's food for thought for everybody. I know I've got some things to think about. And I'm really wondering how this adventure shifts as we go from Pisces to Aquarius. And I wonder, is it the same adventure, or does it somehow have to look different? I'm left pondering that. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Next month, Stuart Anderson will be with us talking about something around our psychology, which seems like a really good follow-up to today. So please show your appreciation to Peter. We are so grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Praise God. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank